Yeah, who am I kidding? Riding my bike while holding this camera and trying to vlog at the same time is way too freaking difficult. I gotta find a better way to vlog while riding my bike. If only I had some sort of experience prior using some sort of other cameras while riding something with two wheels. Well, you guys are watching from the DJI Osmo Action camera now. Mounted to the handlebar. Vlogging with that big camera is just, it's awesome for a lot of things because you can obviously see the quality's really good, but man does it suck for being portable. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm just using the onboard mic for the Osmo Action. Coaster brakes are not the most efficient. Oh, I'm just pushing the bike now. It is way too hot here in the summer. Probably not gonna hear me over this giant truck. Anyways, it's way too hot here in the summer to be trying to commute around downtown on a bicycle. I'm realizing that real quick. This thing will be wonderful in October, November, December, but whew. And these roads are kind of tight to try to stick to the sidewalks. Not exactly feeling the safest. I'll hop back on. Check in with you when we get to the park I was planning on filming at today. This is a bit of a jump cut to later in the day. I was so sweaty before that I just had to cool down inside for a minute and change my clothes and everything. But I am now at the park I wanted to be at today, so let's go ahead and head to the area I want to sit down, and we will find a bench somewhere and talk about today's topic. Alright guys, I seem to have found a pretty private bench to be able to talk to you. I'm going to be cutting back and forth between footage from this little guy, the DJI Osmo Action, and the camera I'm recording this on, the Canon EOS R. This is a controversial camera, and if you're watching this and you know anything about photography and camera gear, you already know probably a lot of the controversial stuff that people debate having to do with this camera. I actually made fun of this camera quite a bit when I first saw it come out. I was a Sony a7 III user. I was, you know, all in on full frame 4K, wanting to make sure that there was no crop factor, making sure that there was at least 120 frames per second, 1080p full HD functionality in my entire season 2 of this vlog. Was really leaning on that 120 frames per second slow-mo that I got with that a7 III, and I was really focusing too much on specs. While that a7 III is a great camera, and I obviously got some great footage, it has its downfalls just like any other camera. And what I wanted to do today is explain why I'm switching back to Canon from Sony, why I'm deciding to go with the EOS R, and why that's going to be great for this channel and for me personally with photography as well as making videos. And I'm going to describe a couple of the downsides that I've realized after having tried this camera out now for about a week. So I'm going to go ahead and power up the DJI Osmo, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I'm working with here. This is the typical setup I'm working with here, as a guy's walking by in the background with his dog. I've got the 5K Joby GorillaPod with the Canon EOS R. I've got the Rode Video Micro with the windscreen on. Obviously the EOS R has the flip out screen, which is one of two features that were completely the reason for me wanting to get this camera. And then obviously the lens I'm using, the Canon 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 L lens. So that's it. That's the camera I've been working with for the past week. And I'm going to break down a couple of the reasons why I decided to switch back from Sony and go back to Canon. Because as a professional photographer, I started my career out professionally when I graduated college in 2010, and I was a 100% Canon shooter. I used nothing but Canon gear. I had the Canon 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, I had the original 6D, I had the 60D, I had the 50D, I had the, I had so many different cameras, and I always loved Canon. I always loved their lenses. I always felt like back in the day when everybody only cared about Canon versus Nikon, and no other camera manufacturer really could stand a chance against the two of them. Everybody always thought Nikon had an advantage when it came to megapixels and sensor performance, and Canon had an advantage when it came to lenses and sharp glass and glass that had character. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with glass, that's inside term for a lens, a camera lens. Canon's lenses are top-notch, and it was really the first reason out of a list of 5 reasons I'm going to break down as to why I chose this camera after having spent so many years with Sony and Panasonic Lumix cameras as well, why I've decided to go back to Canon and sort of forget about a lot of the tech specs that I sort of was caught up on for so long. And so that's the first reason I'm going to list off. It's not the most important reason, the last 2 will be that, but the 5th reason that I've decided to go with the EOS R was because of being able to gain access to all the Canon glass that I knew and loved so much from my prior experience as a photographer, and knowing how great the lenses are and how well they perform for Canon cameras. And the EOS R has lens mount adapters that allow you to flawlessly adapt regular legacy Canon EF lenses that aren't RF mount lenses. You know, RF is the mount for the EOS R if you didn't know. And I was worried about autofocus issues and things like that with having to adapt a lens, but the actual Canon lens adapters do a great job at making sure that you are able to use these lenses without even realizing that they're not native lenses for the RF mount. All it does is it does add a little bit of length and bulk to the lenses, especially when you got a 16 to 35 lens like this that is humongous. It's already a big lens, and that lens adapter adds another element of length to the camera, and that makes it a little bit, when I come to a park like this where there's not anybody around, it's okay. Like, the size isn't that big of an issue, but whenever I'm trying to vlog in public around anybody, the sheer size of this camera, when you put the huge Canon glass on it with the lens adapter and all this stuff, and the flip out screen, and microphone and Joby GorillaPod and all that, it becomes a pretty big package, and it causes people to look at you a lot and really wonder what you're doing. They either think you're crazy, or they're suspicious of if you're being pervy or anything weird. They're thinking like, what is this guy doing with this humongous camera? Because they associate big photography equipment with being telephoto. Like, everybody who doesn't know what they're talking about with cameras automatically thinks that big equipment, long equipment, means that you're trying to zoom in on them and invade their privacy, which obviously a 16 to 35, if you know anything about lenses, is definitely not a lens that can do that. It's an ultra wide. Moving on to the 4th reason that I decided to go with this camera is the fact that I can have dual pixel autofocus. Canon's trademark, amazing autofocus system. Everybody talks about how great it is, and it really is true. I always had so many issues with autofocus not being quite right when I was using Sony, and then when I switched to Lumix, for a brief time this summer I got the Lumix G9 after I decided to go away from the Sony, and I really had a lot of autofocus issues with that camera. That didn't hold a candle to what this camera does now, and it just makes your workflow so difficult when you're trying to be run and gun, out vlogging, shooting stuff. You're not wanting to worry about focus. If you're shooting professional movies or commercials and stuff, autofocus doesn't matter because you're using, obviously, a camera that isn't, you're using cinema lenses and stuff like that are all manual focus anyways. But for this type of YouTube stuff, I want it to be high quality, but I also want it to be extremely easy to use, and I want the camera to run as if it's got its own camera operator running it when I'm talking to the camera. So I can talk to you, I can lean back and it tracks me, I can come back in and it's tracking me still. I can see the little box following my face on the screen right here, and it's just great. I can touch the screen and have rack focus between the background, like, oh look, there's the background, and oh look, there's my face again, and it's tracking me flawlessly. It's amazing, and it does it so smoothly. It doesn't jump past you and jump back like Lumix autofocus does, and You know, and the Sony autofocus would have this thing where it would just be slightly off. Like, it's supposed to focus on your eyes. That's where a camera should always be focusing, is on the eyes of the subject. And for me, it would always be like focusing like here instead of here where the eyes were. It was always just slightly off, or focusing on like right here. I always had a problem with my chest being in focus, and then my face obviously being further forward than my chest when I'm talking. My face would be just barely soft out of focus while talking. That drove me nuts. I'm a perfectionist in some ways, so you know, when you're shooting in that, but here's the thing, is when you're using Sony equipment and Lumix equipment for the sake of having 4K, what is the purpose of that 4K if half your shot is out of focus all the time? So that's number 4, the dual pixel autofocus. It's flawless with Canon. It's a huge reason to go with Canon. And that brings me to a third reason, and that is the preamps for the sound on a Canon camera. I always had a problem with, I don't like to use manual sound. I feel like I'm already having to worry about so much else with making these videos as a one-man act vlogger. I want to just throw a microphone on that doesn't require its own batteries. I love the Rode Video Micro for that. I want to be able to plug it in, and I want the sound in the camera to adjust automatically to what I'm talking about. And so far Canon has been great for that, and that's because the preamps for sound built into the Canon cameras are far superior to the preamps built into the Sony, from what I could tell, because I always had hot peaking sound. Like, every time I would raise my voice a little bit like that, I would have clipping and popping and things going on with the Sony equipment, and you know, who's got time for that? That brings me to my second reason, and that was the flip out screen. I hated not having the flip out screen with my Sony a7 III. I switched to the Lumix G9 because it did have a flip out screen, so I could see myself. When you have a flip out screen and then autofocus that doesn't really work that well, then what's the point in it? You know, like, I use the flip out screen to be able to check focus, tap to focus if I want to, and to be able to see exposure. And with the Sony camera, I didn't have the ability to see myself at all when I was recording, so that was always a big hassle for me. And whenever I was doing those handheld vlog shots where I'm holding my camera out and talking to it at the beach or something, I would have to, before I recorded the shot, I would put my hand out, I'd be holding the camera, I'd put my hand out, point the lens at my hand at about the distance I knew my face would be away from the front of the lens, and I would get focus, I would adjust the exposure and everything based on the light hitting my hand, the light it's going to hit my face, and then I'd hit record, and then I'd switch around and record myself with my face in the spot that I had pre-exposed everything for with my hand, and then hope for the best at that point. If conditions change, if a cloud goes in front of the sun or anything, you know, I don't know that, and that just causes your editing workflow to be way more difficult because the in-camera shot is just not right half the time because you're not able to see your image when you're recording yourself. And with YouTube, being able to see yourself while recording is essential. Part of that, referencing the workflow of this, is the color science inside of Canon cameras. Everybody talks about it in the photography world and video world as being the best, and it really is true. That's the #1 thing I've experienced so far since switching back to Canon with shooting these videos this past week, is the color science of this camera. I don't have to hardly edit it at all. I've been shooting in the C-Log log format, so that I'm shooting in a super flat image, and I'll go ahead and superimpose. I'll cut out all my color corrections right now, so you can see this is what the footage looks like before I color grade it and add contrast, saturation, and everything. And the reason I do this is so that this bright background and darker foreground can be blended more softly in post-production, and all the colors can be adjusted to where it looks nice and doesn't look like a blown out white background like in super video-y. It looks more organic and more filmic, which is the whole thing I'm going for here, vlogging with a little bit more of a cinematic style. I'm able to really step it up to a whole nother notch with this. Now, the Sony camera and Panasonic Lumix cameras offer log profiles as well that allow you to have that super flat image that gives you a lot more dynamic range between the highlights and lowlights to be able to edit more. But the problem with those cameras is their color science sucks. The color science on this camera is great, to where I can record myself right now, and that my skin tones are going to look natural when I throw my preset on my clip in my timeline in Final Cut when I'm editing this video. I'll add my preset amount of contrast and saturation and my LUT that I use. When I do that, I already know that the colors are going to look good. I might have to do a little bit of adjusting for exposure or something to sort of correct some of the dark areas, but other than that, I already know that my footage is going to look good right out of camera after adding those presets. And that was what took me so long when I was shooting all of the Season 2 vlog episodes on the Sony equipment. I'd spend 4 to 6 to 8 hours per episode just working on color correction and color grading this footage. Now my end result ended up being pretty good, but it took way longer to get the footage to look right. And I always felt like this Sony equipment colors seemed to drift all the time. Like in this shot, if I was shooting it with the Sony a7 III, every now and then my skin tones would drift to be a little bit more greenish, just ever so slightly, and then I'd color correct the clip to that, and then a minute later in the clip my skin tones would be drifting more red, and it's like, you know, why is that happening? And it just didn't make any sense to me. And especially when you would go from a shaded area to a bright area, the tonal difference in skin tones specifically would just change so much to where I'd have to have a separate preset for how I would color grade me when I'm outside and in the shade, and then a separate preset for when I'm outside and in direct sunlight, and a separate preset for when I'm inside under incandescent light, and all these different presets that I would then have to tweak heavily from there. Whereas with, so far, I have one preset I've created for this camera, and I'm dropping it on all my footage and just doing minor tweaks, and it looks great. So that brings me to my number one reason I thought this camera in particular, not just Canon, was going to be working for me and was going to revolutionize the way that I shoot these videos. And that reason, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys with this, and that reason is this lens adapter. Now, I mentioned this lens adapter. Canon EOS R cameras can adapt legacy EF lenses to the EOS R via a lens adapter, but the one that you get that's only like 90 bucks or whatever, that's just a lens adapter. It just adapts the lens, it doesn't do anything else, and it works great for autofocus, and that's great for photos. But for video, when I was shooting all the Sony equipment, I was always shooting where I had a variable ND filter on the front of the lens that I would be rotating all the time to correct for exposure instead of adjusting my camera settings, because obviously I wanted my shutter speed to follow the rule of thumb of being double your frame rate and all that stuff to get the proper cinematic motion, and I obviously wanted my aperture to be wide open, as wide as it could be, to be able to blur out the background more. And I didn't want to be adjusting my ISO all over the place, because a lot of times when you're outside in the bright sunlight, ISO 100, like what I'm shooting right now, isn't enough. You need to be able to cutting the light down even more. And so a variable ND filter that adjusts the amount of light that enters the lens by twisting it was what I had to use. And what's great about this particular lens adapter is it has the built-in, you can see this little wheel here. You see the image right there? I'm brightening it, I'm rotating it, darkening the image over and over. Actually pop that out real quick and show you. Ooh. Yeah, now you can see my image on the camera is way brighter. It's a little bit overexposed. That's what this thing does. It allows me to be able to do that, and I'm going to go ahead and show you when I rotate this wheel. See? That is revolutionary, to be able to have a variable ND filter like this built into the back of the lens. Put that back in. It is fantastic to be able to have that ability. Go ahead and turn this off. Part of the reasons it's fantastic to be able to have that is I can swap lenses on the camera without having to have different variable ND filters for the front of the lens that are different sizes for each lens, because obviously each lens is different size diameter, so you have to have a different filter for each lens. So it's super nice to be able to just pop off one lens, pop on another, and the ND filter is built into the adapter, and I don't have to worry about it. And because the ND filter is behind all of the optical elements, the characteristics of a variable ND, when you darken it all the way to its max setting, having that sort of X pattern that shows up, that doesn't happen because of whatever's going on optically with how light is refracting through the lens elements. By going through the ND filter after passing through the lens, that doesn't happen. And this variable ND that's in here adjusts, I think it's up to 9 or 10 stops worth of light, which is phenomenal, because I think the Tiffin variable ND I was using before only adjusted up to, I think, 6 or 7 stops worth of light. So that is a whole lot more light you can cut down as a result of using this variable ND adapter. Now the downside is that adapter is $400. So but I think it's worth every penny, and it's the link that allows the EOS R system to be a completely unique and different camera system compared to anything else on the market. It just makes shooting video a pleasure, which that's the whole point of doing this with this system, is shooting videos for me now are a pleasure instead of it being a chore that was a laborious, difficult process like it was with the Sony equipment. Even though the final product I could get out of the Sony equipment was a lot of times phenomenal, but this equipment just makes the workflow and the process of creating videos so much better, which will translate to the content being better as well. The image, everyone always says the EOS R has a fantastic image, even though you're not shooting the highest resolution. You're typically only shooting 1080p. It's the best looking 1080p out of a DSLR or a mirrorless camera on the market, in my opinion, by far. I think the videos I've been making recently have looked far better than any of the videos I was making when I was shooting with the A7 III. Just go back and look at my videos from season 2 of this vlog when it was a motovlog, and anything not filmed with a GoPro was filmed with the Sony A7 III, and it looks good, but compare it to the footage I'm shooting now, it just doesn't hold a candle to it. It just looks so much better now. And so those are the 5 reasons I have decided to switch back to Canon after years of Sony and Lumix equipment. I'm really excited about it. It's been truly a joy working with this camera so far, and working with Canon L Glass again. There's sort of a romantic notion of all this being the stuff that I built my career with, and I'm back with it again. It's really cool. I'm super stoked to be able to create content now so much more easily and efficiently with this camera system, the EOS R. If you're thinking about going out and buying any equipment and you're debating what you need to do, or maybe you have a Sony A7 III, or maybe you have a Lumix Micro Four Thirds camera, GH5 or G9, or whatever, and you're considering switching and you keep hearing all the buzz about people switching to the EOS R, I recommend going and just doing it. Honestly, my workflow has dramatically improved as a result. You will not regret it. But thanks again for watching this video, guys. If you have not subscribed to this channel, if you are a new viewer watching this, I appreciate you taking the time to watch it all the way through. I hope it was helpful to you, and I would love for you to stick around because this is the Beach Bum Vlog. I am Chad, and I try to make this channel all about South Florida beach life and photography and video making. I love to share the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years with how I make videos, and also with how I built a photography business from scratch out of college. I'm going to be sharing all of that with you guys, and I'm also going to be showcasing the South Florida beach lifestyle that I love living here with my family. If you're interested in any of those things, feel free to stick around because there's going to be a whole lot more content. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment below, let me know what you think. If you think I'm full of crap and you think this camera system is a joke, tell me why. I'd love to hear it. If you think that you might want to go ahead and switch to it, tell me why. If you have any questions about something I didn't cover here, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. I try to answer every question. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Later. The hot tub is finally hot, hopefully. Oh yeah. Hi. You see your face? You got me?